Good morning. I'm pleased to stand before you today with Mayor Brandon Scott, Council President Nick Mosby, Baltimore Police Department Commissioner Michael Harrison, of course, presidents of Korean Society, Baltimore City, Baltimore County, Montgomery County, Detective Julian Min, Jessica Soul, and Young Kim, my Deputy of Major Crimes, Janice Bledsoe, and the talented attorneys in my felony division and community leaders, of course, Miss Shirley Sagaros. Today, a Baltimore City grand jury returned a 22-count indictment against Darrell Doles for offenses that occurred on May 2nd, 2021 in the city of Baltimore, which include 2 counts of attempted first-degree murder, 9 counts of a hate crime, 2 counts of attempted second-degree murder, 2 counts of first-degree assault, 3 counts of second-degree assault, 2 counts of dangerous weapon with intent to injure, 1 count of malicious destruction of property under $1,000, 1 count of attempted malicious destruction of property under $1,000. If convicted, Mr. Doles faces up to 2 life sentences plus 65 years in prison for his alleged conduct. While this defendant is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty, the indictment alleges that after Doles was denied entry to an Asian American business because of his refusal to wear a mask, which was required, he returned to the business armed with a large piece of lumber and attacked the security guard who denied him entry. After being disarmed and removed from the store by its Asian American owner, the defendant went on to an alleged rampage and ransacked 2 other Asian American owned businesses and assaulted and attempted to kill 2 Asian American women, making clear his hateful motive. Among the manner and means by which the defendant conducted and participated in the criminal acts of attempted first-degree murder and related charges are as follows. On May 2nd, 2021, at approximately 11:25 p.m., Mr. Doles entered the Linden Discount Liquors at 904 West North Avenue to use a lottery machine. The security guard asked Mr. Doles to put a face mask on due to the COVID restrictions in the store. Doles refused, and the security guard officer asked Doles to leave the store. Doles grew angry, threw the lottery machine on the ground, kicked it across the store, and walked out of the store. Approximately 10 minutes later, Mr. Doles returned to the store claiming he left personal property there. The security guard again told Mr. Doles he must leave, and Doles left. Doles then returned with a 2x4 piece of lumber, took a full swing, and struck the security guard in the right rib cage and right elbow and right wrist. The security guard suffered minor injuries, including a bruise to his elbow, wrist area, and his rib cage. The owner of the store, an Asian American man, intervened in the altercation and physically removed the piece of lumber from Mr. Doles' grasp. Mr. Doles subsequently fled the location on foot. The lottery machine, valued at or under $1,000, was rendered inoperable because of Mr. Doles' actions. Minutes later, at approximately 11:35, Mr. Doles entered 4040 liquor location at 2139 Pennsylvania Avenue. Mr. Doles walked into the store, kicked the display window, knocking down wine bottles, and exited the store. The owner of the store, a different Asian American man, exited the store and told Mr. Doles not to come back to the store. Doles turned around and said, "F Chinese," and then turned, walking northwest. The Asian American man had never seen Mr. Doles or had any interactions with Mr. Doles prior to this incident. Mr. Doles walked about a block northwest and entered Wonderland Liquors at around 11:45, located at 2045 Pennsylvania Avenue. Upon entering the store, he was observed by Haishin Williams, a 67-year-old Asian American woman of Korean descent, to be repeatedly kicking the display window, knocking things over, and causing a disturbance. Miss Williams had never seen Mr. Doles or had any interaction with him. Prior to this incident, Mr. Doles kicked the display window 12 times before Miss Williams was able to tell Mr. Doles that they were closed and they had to leave. Miss Williams called 911. Dispatch advised that they would send an officer to the store. About 6 to 7 minutes later, Mr. Doles left. Miss Williams went to the front door to close and lock the location. And right as Miss Williams was beginning to close the door, Mr. Doles appeared with a piece of concrete, 1 to 2 inches thick, and square in hand. Miss Williams saw this and tried to grab it from him. The two locked arms and fell to the ground. Mr. Doles grabbed Miss Williams by the hair, pushed her face to the ground. Miss Williams tried to get the block out of Mr. Dole's hand, but he pulled it away while kneeling on top of Miss Williams and struck her 3 times in the head with a concrete block. Miss Williams' sister, Hai Kyung-yo, a 66-year-old Asian American woman of Korean descent, rushed over to try to stop Mr. Doles, but Mr. Doles hit her once in the head with a block the moment she tried to grab him. Miss Yoon had never seen Mr. Doles or had any interactions with Mr. Doles prior to this incident. Mr. Doles got up, threw Miss Williams down to the ground, and tried to fend off Miss Yoon as she tried to push him out of the store. Miss Yoon got Mr. Doles as far as the front door, but he grabbed her by the hair and threw her to the ground. Miss Williams ran over to aid her sister and pulled Mr. Doles' COVID mask off. Mr. Doles then struck Miss Yoon and Miss Williams in the head with a concrete block yet again. Miss Williams fell on top of her sister, and Mr. Doles struck Miss Williams in the head again. Miss Williams fell down, and Mr. Doles struck both Miss Williams and Miss Yoon in the head with a concrete block yet again. Yoon crawled away and got up as Mr. Doles dragged Miss Williams by her hair on the ground back into the store. Miss Yoon managed to get the block away from Mr. Doles and pushed him out of the store. Covered in blood, both Miss Williams and Miss Yoon came back into the store and called 911. Approximately 45 minutes after the attack, with the assistance of Miss Yoon's son, officers detained Mr. Doles until the primary officer arrived. Mr. Doles sat on the ground uncuffed while waiting for the primary officer, and a person whom Mr. Doles referred to as Sean was on the scene. Doles asked Sean to tell the officers he was elsewhere. Sean declined to do so and said Doles shouldn't have assaulted that lady, and the following conversation ensued. Mr. Doles, they need to go back to their country. Sean, that's what this was all about? Mr. Doles, she shouldn't have came out. They effed your country up, but you still love them. F out of here. I won't eat out of their MFing stores. Sean, I love my country to death. Mr. Doles, I'll order out before I eat that MFing food. Williams suffered multiple lacerations. Miss Williams suffered multiple lacerations to the head, bled profusely, and had swelling and bruising around her eye. She was transported to shock trauma for her injuries. She received stitches in 3 places on her head. 1 gash required a plastic surgeon to provide 3 layers of stitching to close the wound. She has missed work since the event and suffers from headaches and dizziness. Miss Yoon also suffered bleeding lacerations to her forehead and a possible concussion. Miss Yoon was transported to Grace Medical Center to be treated. She suffered a gash to her temple. It was too deep and near too many veins to stitch safely. They could only bandage as best they could and follow up to ensure the wound is closing and healing properly. While again, the defendant is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty, and I want to be clear that an indictment is not a conviction. However, today's indictment does demonstrate yet again my office's commitment to applying one standard of justice for all. We remain committed to fairness and equality, and we will not tolerate racially motivated crimes of violence inflicted on members of our community. What we've all bore witness to over the past year is resentment over coronavirus restrictions, which have unleashed a tidal wave of unjustified, vicious assaults against Asian Americans across this nation. This misplaced anger and hatred toward our Asian American community members is disturbing, unacceptable, and will not be tolerated in the city of Baltimore. I want to thank Mayor Scott, Council President Nick Mosby, and Commissioner Harrison for their support and partnership as we stand here today, united against the alleged violence and hatred. I applaud my team for their hard work on this ongoing investigation. I would especially like to thank my Deputy of Major Crimes, Janice Bledsoe, my Chief Deputy, Michael Schatzel, my Chief Felony of Crimes, Cynthia Banks, and Assistant State's Attorney James Hammond for their dedication on this investigation. I once again applaud our partnership with BPD on this investigation, who successfully and swiftly apprehended this individual, which we all know is no small feat. I've said it before, collaboration and partnership is key to tackling the violence in our city. Together, we are stronger. Together, we can eradicate the violence from our streets and achieve the progress that we seek and that our communities deserve. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mayor Scott.
Thank you, Madam State's Attorney. I want to today thank again first the Baltimore Police Department for swiftly apprehending this suspect in this racist, unacceptable, cowardly attack. We cannot and will not accept that we're going to have grown men attacking anyone, if for certain not women in our city. I want to thank the State's Attorney and her office for their leadership in showing that hate has no place in our city. And I'll get straight to the point. The leaders must be concerned about the humanity of others if we are serious about making a safer, more equitable Baltimore. We all have struggled to watch the footage of two Asian women fighting off this cowardly attack. These women have families, they work in communities, and they were someone's sister, mother, and aunt. We cannot just stand by and allow that to happen, and we're grateful for the work of the BPD and to the State's Attorney's Office for continuing to try to hold these individuals accountable. My heart continues to be with the families as they heal from this attack, and as well with their families, friends, and the communities that have been impacted by this unacceptable incident. My administration has no tolerance for racially motivated acts of discrimination and hate crimes. I remain committed to making sure that this city, Baltimore, has the resources and service accessible and inclusive of all Baltimoreans, regardless of race, ethnic background, immigrant status, or language. We will be a city for everyone who considers themselves a Baltimorean. From the racist rhetoric surrounding COVID-19 and to the tragic shooting we saw in Atlanta, now is the time to put our arms around our Asian community and let them know that we love them, that they are part of our community, and we want them to continue to be here, and we will do everything with our power to make sure that they're safe. But we also have to call out people and hold people accountable when they do acts like this in our city consistently. We will make sure that these people are brought to justice, and that's why we're here today. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, State's Attorney Mosby, for inviting me to be here today. This announcement of charging Mr. Dahl is a very welcomed message to many in our community that saw this heinous act of violence against two business members of our community. On the evening of this incident, our officers took swift and appropriate action in immediately arresting 50-year-old Darrell Doles. And at this time, he's currently being held at central booking without bail as he awaits trial. What we all saw in that video was not only shocking to the conscience, but was compelling enough to seek the maximum penalties in this violent act. And after working with the State's Attorney's Office, the decision to pursue hate charges against Darrell Doles, I want to thank the officers and commanders of the Central District for their thorough investigation into this incident, and also to the State's Attorney's Office for their coordinated efforts with our officers in bringing justice for the victims. I also want to thank the many community members for their outpouring of support for these victims as they recover from their injuries. We at the Baltimore Police Department take every crime seriously, regardless of race, religion, sex, gender identity, age, and/or disability. And if you are intent on bringing harm to others, regardless of your motives, we are committed to finding you and holding you accountable. Thank you, and at this time I'll turn it over to our Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. We consistently talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. But for Baltimore to truly get there, for our nation to truly get there, we must end hate. Hate is unacceptable. Hate is unnecessary. Hate is disgusting. And I think standing before you at this press conference is the sign of the city leadership that said hate will be intolerable here to the citizens of Baltimore, no matter what community you represent. Be it your race, be it your age, be it your religion, be it your sexuality. In order for us to grow our city, we must continue to go after hate. Again, we can't talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion on a serious and sustainable level until we address hate the way that the police department, the state's attorney, and the mayor of Baltimore decides to do today. The City Council of Baltimore stands committed to this collective front of continuing to go in after and driving out hate. Thank you.
Questions, guys? Yeah. Did you guys want to speak? I don't think they want to speak. No? No, they don't want to speak.
For the situation in West Baltimore where those two women were attacked, was that the first incident? And do you think that sparked additional incidents after?
So what I described, and I have to stick to the four corners of the indictment, right, and describing what took place, there were three different incidents. There was the first incident at the first location in which there was the initial exchange where he refused to put on a mask, had a confrontation with the individual there, and then an Asian American owner took away the lumber away from him that set him off on a rampage. He then went into another location, kicked down the wine bottles, screamed out the F Chinese, and then from there went to the third place in which I described the brutal assault that took place where he assaulted the 67 and 66-year-old women, Asian American women, with a concrete block beating them in the head.
In relation to the initial incident, you mentioned the lottery. Any reason to suspect alcohol may have been a factor on his mental capacity at the time?
So again, I can't go beyond the four corners of the indictment, but this matter is now an open and pending matter, and we will see.
Commissioner and the mayor, are taking unrelated questions?
Go ahead, Dave. You go.
This is for the commissioner and the mayor. Any update regarding the Bells Point? I know there's been a number of surveillance videos that you're probably looking at. Any identification of the shooter and where they stand with that investigation?
So it is an ongoing investigation. Investigators, since the time of that incident, have been looking through camera footage and looking for more camera footage. As of yet, they have not yet come to me with an identification of a shooter, but we're still going through tons and tons of video. We're still looking for more video.
And moving into this upcoming weekend, what preventions may be in place when we see continued headed?
Well, we're always assessing when and where to enhance the security. Certainly, we're taking that into consideration as we balance out the needs of the entire city and what's actually needed in Fells Point. So the answer is yes, we're working on that.
And then, one second. I think, Dave, there's a couple of things that we have to talk about, and thank you for your question. We have to understand that there were officers there. This shooting happened 25 feet away from officers, right? And we have to understand when we have folks who are that brazen, that means that they don't care about the consequences. And that's why we are going to make sure that we go and remove these people from our streets. Because if you're that brazen to do that in front of police officers, that means you don't care about going to jail. You don't care about how long you're going to jail. Everyone has to understand that. And we have to make sure that we're consistently doing that. We're going to always make sure that we work to make sure that things are in place, not just in Fells Point, but across the city. But we also have to be able to have people gather, especially allowing our younger black people to gather and not have this nonsense. You can see time and time again, I know you probably comb through the social media and just see people saying, why can't we go anywhere and not have these things happen? People are sick of it. We have to be better as people too. We cannot allow our friends to be that weak, that they are that emotional. We have to hold ourselves accountable as a community and not to allow our people that we know to just say, oh, if I get into any little minor dispute, we're going to ruin everything for everyone else. We will find these people. We will continue to put things in place, but everyone has to understand the mindset of someone that would do it that close to a police officer.
What is your specific message to the young black community, because there are photos circulating online of them on top of police cruisers slipping off their finger? What would you say to Baltimore youth who may not have been involved in the shooting,
Right.
but definitely added to that atmosphere?
Well, I think that, listen, we want our young black community to have fun, but we have to also understand that we have to do things in accordance with decorum, as we would say. We have to also be better. We have to understand there's already a microscope on everybody young and black. You think, I know a lot about that, right? but we have to be better amongst ourselves. We can show that we can go out into places and have a good time and not have all of these things happen. We can show that we can go to anywhere in the city and not have trash everywhere. We have to have self-accountability too, and not allow those who want to pigeonhole young African Americans. Because think about the amount of people that were there, and we're going to highlight the results of a few. Think about how many young black people go to places in the city each and every day and nothing happens. We have to make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable as well. Thank you, Dave.
The community perception is, because in addition to a shooting, there's a lot of disorderly conduct. Community perception is the police aren't going to do anything about disorderly conduct because they're concerned that you're only going to prosecute serious crime.
So what I can tell you is that we've been very clear, right? We look at the number of homicides and number of non-fatal shootings, and what we want to be able to do is to address those issues and those concerns. Having the police respond to the harbor for an open container makes absolutely no sense when we have an increase in non-fatal shootings and homicides. It's about resource allocation. You can't have it both ways. We want to deploy our officers in a way that makes sense for trying to change the trajectory of violence in our city.
As far as the community perception, though, that they're mistaken.
I think that that's unfortunately people are looking to point fingers, right? And that often happens as opposed to understanding the importance of that holistic approach and understanding the importance of the mayor, the commissioner, and myself being on the same page and saying, let's come together and focus on violent crime. Let's change the trajectory of what's been happening for these young people. Let's make sure they have something productive to do as opposed to just resorting to what we've always done and criminalizing these lower level offenses, misdemeanor offenses that have nothing to do with public safety.
Mr. Mayor,
We're going to take one last question.
Mr. Mayor, prior to this weekend, and probably every Thursday through Sunday, there's a lot of motorcycle activity in and around Fells Point, adding to the chaos. Is closing streets one of the options on the table?
So we actually did that this weekend, and they have been doing that. We know that we will put every resource that we have, from closing streets. We know, but also we want to make sure that we are considering everyone, right? Because if you're a business there and the streets are closed, there's a lot less likely people to come. We had the streets closed this weekend. We know that that portion went well without the streets being open, but we still had the nonsense from that small group of people. This is about making sure, Dave, that we allow our businesses to have the capacity to have people there. We're grateful that now people are actually going back into places like that, but we cannot and will not accept the nonsense that happened and won't allow a few people to ruin a great city attraction for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.